You looking for me?
Imagine a world in which the spectral form of existential dread writer H.P. Lovecraft teams up with Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, with her raven tresses and dark gowns. Not a hallucination, but the idea behind a comic book series called Elvira meets H.P. Lovecraft. Imagine these two seemingly unrelated figures combined. The Mistress of the Dark embarks on a quest, and Elvira meets H.P. Lovecraft, channeling the spirit of Lovecraft. Their objective? Find the last remaining copy of the powerful old book, called the Necronomicon. This ancient book is the key to preventing Lovecraft's terrifying creatures, known as the Great Old Ones, from capturing the planet. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Father of cosmic horror and a horror TV hostess. Who are they? Elvira. Elvira isn't your typical horror hostess. Cassandra Peterson's iconic creation blends chills and giggles. A Halloween queen with a wicked wit and a penchant for gothic glamour. Elvira's big screen debut, in Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, 1988, took her beyond the B-movie introduction she was known for. Inheriting a mansion, a poodle, and a cookbook in a button-down town, Elvira's comedic timing clashes with the uptight locals, sparking a supernatural showdown. Elvira's signature style, the raven hair, the bombshell figure, and the ever-present black gown, is instantly recognizable. Her rise to fame began on the television's Movie Macabre, where she introduced cheesy horror flicks with a sardonic wink. Elvira's charm lies in her ability to playfully mock both the films and herself, never taking things too seriously. The 1988 film pits Elvira against a double threat: the uptight town and her own conniving uncle, hungry for a mysterious spellbook. Horror elements, the supernatural and the macabre, weaved through the slapstick humor and satirical jabs. Critical reception was mixed, with Peterson's performance garnering both a Saturn Award nomination for Best Actress and a Razzie nomination for Worst Actress, a testament to the film's audacious humor. Elvira's influence goes far beyond the real. She's become a symbol of alternative culture, an icon for those who embrace the darker, weirder corners of life. Her image adorns comic books, video games, and countless fan-made creations. Convention appearances solidify her status as a cult classic, a character who refuses to fade into obscurity. Elvira's legacy is one that pushes boundaries. She celebrates individuality and self-expression, championing the outsiders and the oddballs. Her unique blend of humor and horror keeps her relevant even decades later, reminding us that sometimes the best way to fight the darkness is with a laugh, and maybe a perfectly timed one-liner. H.P. Lovecraft, a titan of weird fiction. Howard Phillips Lovecraft, 1890 to 1937, looms large in the landscape of horror literature. His signature touch, the Cthulhu mythos, continues to cast the long shadow, influencing countless writers, artists, and filmmakers across generations. Born into wealth, he later faced poverty after his grandfather's death and his father's institutionalization. Undeterred, his passion for science, mythology, and literature fueled his journey to become a literary icon of the 20th century. Early ventures into writing saw him crafting essays for the United Amateur Press Association, before delving into the world of pulp fiction. His signature theme emerged: ordinary New Englanders confronting nightmarish beings from beyond the stars. Cosmicism, Lovecraft's philosophical cornerstone, permeates his work. It paints humanity as a speck in a vast, uncaring cosmos, vulnerable to oblivion at any moment. This chilling perspective infuses his stories with a sense of existential dread, highlighting the fragility of human existence. Among his most celebrated works are The Call of Cthulhu, At the Mountain of Madness, The Shadow over Innsmouth, and The Shadow Out of Time. These tales transcend mere horror. They delve into the unknown and unknowable, reflecting Lovecraft's complex views on knowledge and the limitations of human understanding. Lovecraft's prose sets him apart. Poetic language and a high literary bar elevate his work above typical horror fare. His stories unfold in a fictionalized New England, a landscape he intimately knew, lending a layer of chilling realism to his fantastical narratives. Despite his literary prowess, Lovecraft's life was one of seclusion and financial hardship. Ghostwriting and revisions kept him afloat, with his true literary recognition arriving only after his death. Lovecraft's legacy is a complex one. While his work is lauded for its imagination and literary merit, his personal views, particularly his racism, remain a source of criticism. However, his impact on horror fiction remains undeniable, with his creations continuing to inspire generations of storytellers and artists. What happens when they meet? Elvira Meets H.P. Lovecraft is a comic that combines tentacled horror and cosmic comedy. Elvira, the protagonist of the story, sets out on a mission with the spirit of H.P. Lovecraft. Their goal is to locate the final copy of the potent, antiquated book known as the Necronomicon. They have to work together to keep the world safe from the Great Old One's grasp. Author David Avallone and illustrator Kuber Ball, who have worked on films like Elvira in Monsterland and Vampirella, respectively, are responsible for crafting the narrative. The comic looks to be an exciting story that blends Lovecraftian horror with Elvira's spirit of adventure. Let's take a moment to review Elvira's current status in the Dynamite Universe miniseries and arcs before we dive into the comic. The Mistress of the Night, Elvira, is accustomed to interacting with supernatural entities. She's accomplished it all, from taking on Fellini's magic remote control to navigating other dimensions and going up against a multiverse of Draculas. She now meets the ghost of H.P. Lovecraft in this new arc, which sets the stage for an intriguing and original plot. In the dream that opens, Elvira meets H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft asks Elvira to help stop a cult from releasing the dreaded Cthulhu. Elvira must stop the cult from searching for the last authentic copy of the Necronomicon. Lovecraft's troubled past causes Elvira to initially be reluctant, but she eventually agrees to the mission. As they set out on their mission, they come across a phony Necronomicon and an enigmatic cult headed by the terrifying Nyarlathotep. The conclusion of the issue reveals that the cult wants to unleash Cthulhu and cause chaos on Earth. The comic touches on Lovecraft's historical racism, which is an intriguing feature worth mentioning. Although Lovecraft's past is mentioned, the story doesn't focus on it the whole time. Instead, it adds complexity to the character dynamics by functioning as a plot point for Lovecraft's redemption arc. If you're an Elvira fan, the comic does a great job capturing her essence. Avallone does a fantastic job retaining her charm and wit. The narrative flows naturally with Elvira's regular encounters and paranormal threats, demonstrating Avallone's skill and wit. The narrative flows naturally with Elvira's regular encounters with paranormal threats, demonstrating Avallone's skill with the role. Lovecraft is presented well, acknowledging his contributions to horror literature despite his flaws. The portrayal of Nyarlathotep is especially well done, perfectly encapsulating the unsettling spirit of Lovecraftian terror. Let's look at what happens in the first issue of the comic. Elvira is dreaming and is seen getting cozy with what looks like a hairy creature dressed as Elvis Presley. She certainly has a thing for men with hairy chests. As the two embrace, H.P. Lovecraft popped up from behind and commanded her to provide some vital services. He was here to enlist her in the cause of light, as the forces of darkness were on the march. Without giving it a single thought, Elvira immediately refuses. Lovecraft invited her to follow him down the 700 steps to the gates of deep slumber, and again, of course, she refused. To her, Lovecraft was just a creepy ghost with terrible mannerisms. As the hairy Elvis Presley tried to defend Elvira, Lovecraft turned him into ash with just a touch of his hands. All of us wish for powers like this, don't we? Anyway, Lovecraft then sings the ballad of Elvira's war achievements, but she isn't interested. He then lets her have a glimpse of the near future, where Cthulhu is seen destroying Seattle. This is way too much for Elvira to fathom, and she simply chose to wake up from her nap. Suddenly, she heard her puppy making some noises downstairs. Upon inspection, she noticed that her puppy was barking at a book. But was it just an ordinary book? Of course not, because Lovecraft was in it, and he was talking. Well, not Lovecraft in person. It was a talking image of him. And not just that, he started coming out of the book. Since his death, he had been floating in the utter blackness of the cosmic abyss. Ultimately, he came across the Lord of the Abyss and was given a task. He was commanded to save the world as the forces of darkness, Cthulhu and his demonic kin, were afoot. They sought the last true copy of Necronomicon to establish dominion over the earth and the stars. At this point, Elvira was confused, and we can't blame her, since those were all fictional characters for her. But she had a copy of Necronomicon from 1981. She decides to help Lovecraft, and in return, she only wants his respect. The two then head out in Elvira's car, and were being followed. They ultimately arrived at the Museum of Madness, and they weren't being followed anymore. Talk about paranoia. They meet Jean, who thought that Lovecraft was a cosplayer. Jean then led them to the original book, which was left there by some woman. Lovecraft recognized the writing and the spells. He decided to perform an incantation to check if the book was real, but he was interrupted by some hooded figures. The hooded gang demanded the book, took it, and left. But since Lovecraft's spell didn't work, it was probably a fake. Now, somewhere in the Mojave Desert, the hooded gang had taken the book to their leader, Dr. Dexter. He too realized that the book was counterfeit, and his concentration slipped, turning him into a weird monster with a deformed body. After all, he was Nyarlathotep. Let's find out what happens in the second issue. Elvira is seen sitting in an airplane, reading about Arkham because she's heading there. Once again, talking like a picture in a book, Lovecraft yells at her. An old lady sitting beside Elvira suspects that she's arguing with her book. They soon reach Arkham, and Elvira visits a Miskatonic university. Lovecraft gets out of the book, and together they head over to the reception. Upon demanding the book, the librarians guess the book's name, while refusing to believe that those two were the original Elvira and H.P. Lovecraft. After a bit of discussion, the librarians decided to show them the original Necronomicon. Together, the four of them head over to a restricted room. Meanwhile, the three hooded thugs return, but they're wearing normal clothes this time. Just as their boss had suspected, Elvira led them to another copy. Once again, they decided to wear their capes and hoods and get on with their business. Now Elvira and Lovecraft finally came across the original book when they heard someone unlock the doorway. They hurriedly took out the book, and one of the librarians introduced herself as Allison Whately. This rings a bell for Lovecraft, and Allison starts to glow. Within seconds, she spawned white wings and giant teeth. After all, it was the Dunwich Horror. She immediately grabbed Elvira, threatening to pull off her arms and legs. The hooded gang entered the room, and Allison flew away with Elvira. She wanted Lovecraft to release Yog-Sothoth, who was the gate and guardian of the gate. That being said, she tied Elvira down to an X-shaped platform, but it turns out nothing could actually be done since that book wasn't the true copy of the Necronomicon. Disappointed, Allison returns to her human form. The hooded thugs take their chance for the book again, and Elvira tricks them into believing that it's the true copy. The comic ends with some October Grendel name dropping. Marvelous verdict. Alright, this meetup is a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. Considering the comic's positive reception, we could possibly get to see this duo embark on some more crazy adventures together. Since Lovecraft's lore is endless, just like Elvira's witty comebacks, you never know what's coming next. How else would you like to pair up those two, and what would be the premise? Tell us in the comics. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!